And you don't even need me now, 'cause this is just a Kirblog that you used to know. Hi everybody, I'm recording this one a week in advance. I decided to make good on my word before, where I said I was going to maybe record the next Kirblog topic immediately after. So I'm recording this on Saturday, March 12th, because I just felt like in kind of a recording mood. So I'm getting both of the Kirblogs done for this week that is now almost over. I'm time travel. What else is new? Done way ahead of time. So this is a sequel. For those of you, I'll say ahead of time, if you did not see the previous topic answering about creating mysteries in stories in general, I used TOME as an example of that. Go take a listen to that. Because I will also, as I mentioned before, I'll be talking about a lot of spoilers for the Terrain of Magical Expertise series. So if you haven't seen the show and you don't want to be too spoiled, then I apologize for that. This might be alienating people a little bit, but I do hope that you will watch it because it's good and I put lots of work into it with me and my friends for 4 years. So yeah. But anyway, so this is, as I promised, I will be reading the topic itself. This came from Rtkts, or Rtkts. Hey Kirb, for another Kirblog, I'd be curious to know your thoughts on rights versus responsibilities held by creators when releasing their content to the public or an audience. Obviously, you've talked a lot about it in previous blogs, but I'd like to see you go a bit more in depth with this one, as I think it's one of the more challenging aspects any content creator or anything really faces. What have been your experiences in relation to considering how others have reacted towards TOME and other projects? Have there been times where your intention has clashed with delivery of content resulting in negative or positive consequences? Have you had to hold back on certain things during TOME's developments for fear of unintentionally offending or otherwise insulting the view of others? Do you feel that a content creator even holds some level of responsibility in how they present their work? Or do you feel that a content creator should be able to present anything they want regardless of who it may affect or have any implications on, free speech or moderated speech? I feel this question is particularly relevant to the Season 2 finale and the questions it raises about the use of TOME's technology and how it may have affected the world. I know a few people disagree with the final outcome, with some finding the conclusion of the use of that technology to be rather unethical. I'd love to hear your feedback in regard to these criticisms as well. Thank you for the great question. I've actually, as I often do with a lot of these, I've been sitting on this one for a long time, since I was kind of on the path of, doing a whole bunch of these, answering a lot of these questions that have been submitted to me over quite a while now that have all been kind of relevant to my process in storytelling and advice to people on those who want to make their own stories, whether it's an animated show or a game or a movie or whatever, a book, etc. So I wanted to wait to tackle this one for a while because I wanted to cover some other particular topics first. I have, so here I am, and thank you again for the patience and for the great question. So in the last exciting episode of Kirblog, I was talking about a lot of the mysteries and kind of big twists that I had building up throughout the course of the entire show, of all 16 episodes of TOME. One of the big ones that I laid a few little minor pieces for, but didn't reveal the truth of until the last episode of the show, was the villain behind the villain trope character, the big final boss character, I guess, that our heroes had to face off against, which was Ruby Rules. Just to repeat briefly, what I wanted to do was I wanted to have another character because I wanted Zeto and Kizuna to still be characters that weren't technically like antagonists in terms of like they weren't villainous figures. They definitely had their own agendas, and whether or not they were making the right choices is entirely up to the viewer's discretion, because it could be very easily said that they were making a lot of gray, they were in a very gray area of like, is this ethical? Is this the right thing to do? Like, we're trying to do something right, but we don't know if that's the case, kind of thing, And while Ruby Rules, or rather while the character, whoever it was going to be that was, behind them, I had planned for their motivation to be what it was, in that the point of what they were trying to do is to find the forbidden power so they could control Softy and use basically the advanced artificial intelligence that makes up Softy's code to revolutionize technology for the entire world. Because they personally felt that was the right thing to do, that the other Net Kings, the programmers that created TOME, weren't utilizing, because they decided to treat Softy, this thing that they had basically accidentally created, as a living being, and not as a computer program, not as like this piece of technology, more or less. I wanted to have a character like that, and I wanted to leave that revelation until towards the end of the entire story. Originally in TV Tome Adventures, the character behind Zeto, particularly who is the leader of the hackers in that version, exclusively, was EXE or Exec as people know him in Tome. I specifically did not want to make that character be the one a second time. So I planned for it to be a different Net King, and I thought that Ruby Rules being a shapeshifter character, some kind of interesting things could happen with that, and I could, and also just the sort of like trickster, like almost Loki. Not like I wasn't influenced by Loki because the Marvel movies weren't even out at that time when I was coming up with the story. But I mean, in that sort of like character archetype, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to go with that sort of route. So I chose him to be that character. So the thing is. And I also talked about this briefly in the last episode. I mentioned how Liz, my script supervisor, who is a big reason why the show was as good as it was, because a lot of the ideas that she had come up with and integrated into the episode scripts and everything, and the overall plot of the show were a major help. But this is the truth, is that we definitely butted heads a lot on the big reveal of Ruby Rules in the final episode. She personally, and this is not a judgment against her. This is just I wanted to tell the story because I feel that it's important and interesting and has to do with the topic at hand. Liz felt that, first of all, it was not going to be a satisfying mystery to unveil. She felt that it was too big of a risk of like alienating everybody, or like it being something that would it wouldn't be satisfying in the end, more or less. And again, to her credit, there are a few people that I saw that were not satisfied by that idea, and thought that it was very out of nowhere, or that it even came off like it was just I pulled out of my ass at the last second, and that's entirely down to I was the one who fought to keep that idea, as opposed to other ones that we did play with. She and I went back and forth and came up with some other alternatives for how the finale was going to go. I mentioned stuff like maybe having Kizuna be the big final villain, or maybe Neo Mutant. Actually, I think one I didn't mention last time was just having the final battle against the Shadow Guard beast infected by the virus being the final fight, and that was going to be it. But I personally wanted to go with this idea and this motivation of this character wanting to utilize Softy's technology for that particular reason. And to be fair too, and by fair I mean like to, kind of call myself out on whether it was a good idea or not, because it is entirely up for debate. Is that one could even say it's kind of flimsy. It's like I had as much explanation as I could for what exactly he wanted to do with Softy's code and like what to use it for. But the specifics of how exactly it would work. I'm not a tech guy. I have no idea how like that sort of thing even inherently works in the first place. So who am I to say if that was even something that was humanly possible? How would he have copied the code? How would he have, sold it off or whatever? How would this whole thing have worked and all that shit? To be fair, there's lots of holes in it, and it's not necessarily it could be read as flimsy. So that is entirely on me, because I was the one that put my foot down and said, no, I really believe in this idea. I really want to do this. The main reason why I really believed in this, and this is going to get back to specifically the topic, I wanted to just mention that because I felt like it is important and fair to put that information out there, that like, yes, there was talk about doing other ideas, and a lot of the ideas that Liz came up with were really, really solid. It was not a matter of like of me thinking that they were not as good or anything like that. And maybe you could even account it for stubbornness. Maybe I just was so married to the idea that I just didn't want to give it up, because I just didn't want to admit that it was not as good as it could be, or whatever. Who knows? But that was the situation. That's the truth. I just so it's out there. But again, the main reason why I believed in that idea and why I wanted to do it in the first place had to do with the overall usage of Softy as a character in general. And the big conversation between Ruby Rules and the Net Kings towards the end of the final episode is kind of the big sort of payoff as to what it is that I was kind of going for. And that they said, like, yeah, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe we should have listened to you. Maybe your whole idea about what to use Softy for was better for the entire world, instead of using her for a fucking virtual reality video game. We make a lot of people happy with this game. Maybe we could have made millions and millions of more people happy and gone down in history as these big revolutionary people in the world. for what it is that they discovered and what they created together and everything. But they chose to take this not even like more moral approach, because that's the thing. Whether or not the Net Kings made the right choice is what I wanted to be open to interpretation. For me, like, okay, for the type of person that I am, I agree with the Net Kings. I agree with what it is that they wanted to do, and that it's like, no, we consider Softy to be a living entity. Even though they are a digital being, even though they're not flesh and blood, we consider them to be a real sentient being. And we didn't want to use them for something wrong. We didn't want what we considered to be wrong. We didn't want to use them for, self-aggrandizing and doing this big thing that could, possibly risk, her being abused or like, or even, being corrupted and deleted entirely. They would have no idea. There's so many unpredictable factors. So they decided to go the route of getting the government directly involved and keeping them a trade secret, because it was way too big of it was too big of a deal to just let slip out, more or less. And Ruby Rules, even I'll say maybe, because pretend I'm speaking as Zeto practically, because he kind of represented me in the confines of the story. Maybe Ruby Rules really was right. Obviously, Zeto in the context of the actual story, like in universe, he didn't know that that's what Ruby Rules' plan was. The whole point of what Zeto and Kizuna were doing is that they were trying to prevent something like that from happening again. They didn't want anybody else to be hurt the way that Zeto was in the big accident that happens in episode 0. So they had a positive intention behind the quote-unquote bad things that they were doing. And especially in cases where it was even risking people's health because of the forbidden power and the virus and everything, having to do with it. Ruby Rules, in his case, was like, no, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Like, I don't care who I have to step on, because I believe that this is for the greater good. This is for the benefit of all mankind. And, these stupid people that I worked with are holding this idea back. I'm not okay with this, and therefore I can't trust them. Like that, I mentioned this about in the storytelling process one, that when I realized I didn't really have like a guiding theme about TOME, I think that the one that I kind of discovered in retrospect is trust. Ruby Rules didn't trust the Net Kings. He didn't trust Zeto and Kizuna. Zeto and Kizuna didn't trust anybody else. Like in the case of Zeto/Kerbifer, he didn't trust his friends with the information of what was going on. But meanwhile, all of the main good guy characters did trust each other. And it was that trust between them that allowed them to triumph over evil and etc. kind of thing. So that was kind of what the result of that was. And that final conversation in episode 15, ultimately what happened to Ruby Rules, and ultimately what may happen, in we don't know for sure what happened after that, but the fact that there are consequences to this, and everybody's going to have to pay in some way, shape, or form as to how this happens, sort of thing. That was kind of the more sort of like open up to interpretation sort of thing that I wanted to do with the last part of the story. And again, whether it was the best route that it could have gone, because while I am very grateful for the response that we got at the anime convention that we showed it at, and just the general comments we got on the last episode, and even actually to say this too, Liz in the end, for all the understandable disagreements that she had with the story, she still thought episode 15 was very well executed and it worked. And I was very grateful and was very, very happy when I got, when we were all together, a bunch of us at the convention, I got the message from her saying like, hey, like you did a really good job on this, and you guys worked really hard, and I'm really satisfied with it and everything. Like that did make me happy. But again, she could have been right the whole time. It's very, very possible that, and I actually, I think I also mentioned this before in the Taking Criticism Kirblog, because her different ideas were for the sake of, listen, I don't think that this is as good as it could be, and I think that these ideas might be better. Let's develop this. And I ultimately went with what it is that I believed in, and and whether or not it was the best that it could have been is just like the idea that I wanted to stick with. That's open entirely to your guys' interpretation, and that's kind of the crux of what this whole topic kind of is talking about in this question that I've been sitting on from Rtkts. Is that I can intend whatever it is that I want in what it is that I create. I can have this whole idea of what the moral is and what the lesson is and what the characters are supposed to be going through and what is meant to be hopefully the satisfying reaction that gets that I'm supposed to get from it, but I don't know what the reaction is going to be. I can only do what I believe in and what I think is the best for and this is not just for Tome, this is for anything that I make. What I believe is the best experience of the story and what the most amount of people are going to get out of it in the long run. And that's, but whether or not it actually is effective, and whether or not it works is entirely up to what the response is. That's part of the reason why, as a kid, I didn't always fully agree, and this more has to do with work and not just yourself as a person, but it's part of the reason why I didn't always agree with the idea of you shouldn't care about so much what people think of you, or you should just make whatever you want and not care about what other people think of it. That's not necessarily true, because for one thing, again, that goes back to a lot of the points I made about the taking criticism topic that I talked about a little while ago. But more importantly, it has to do with if you're making something that is a consumable piece of media, like a story experience that other people are going to to watch or play or read or whatever, you want it to be something that is good in the way, or elicits some kind of positive experience, in the long run. Because I think what if I'm writing like a really depressing or like a really scary movie, and the point is to make you feel bad? It's like, well, even so, if that's still like with an intention of like having an impact on your audience in some way or whatever, I don't write those type of stories, so I wouldn't know how that sort of thing goes. But my intention, like I've always said, is it's about leaving as positive of an impact on people as possible. I've been talking about this, especially with Tome, for quite a while now, and that is truly the case. And that's the reason why I do think about the audience reaction. And because I'll have little things like, okay, like I had the bit about Archie, right? A lot of people got upset about Archie being like, quote unquote, killed off in like the first part of the tournament. I wasn't trying to build him up like he was some big major character that was going to be like the sixth ranger of the crew or whatever. But a lot of people got upset about that. And I admit that was like, haha, like this is going to be funny. It's kind of a gag. And I did think it was amusing that like everybody was so like, oh man, how could you do that? I liked him. Like it was funny, but not in like a haha, I'm torturing my audience kind of way. Like not like that. But that's what I mean is like, I do think about how all of that stuff is going to impact the people that are watching and giving enough of a shit to experience what it is that I've crafted as a story in general, and especially with the help of so many people that I've had on board, the production that is. Now, in terms of the reaction itself, I actually don't think I've talked about this in like a while now. I have like a long time ago probably, but one of the first big things that was actually making me have a lot of doubt in what I was doing, and this is part of the reason why I brought Liz on as the script supervisor in the first place, and part of also why I have so much to thank her for, because the changes that she helped make to Flame Girl as a character really, really helped. When episode 3 came out, and a lot of people did like episode 3 in the long run, like it actually did better than episode 2 did, like when it first came out. But I and a lot of my colleagues were kind of dissatisfied with what happened with Flamey as a character, because the way okay, here's the thing. I'll talk about intention first and then the reaction. The intention in that episode was that I was building the fact that both Flamey and Alpha had a thing for each other, and they were a little like, cutely awkward about it. I had the scenes in the beginning of that episode showing them talking about each other to their friends. Flamey was talking about Alpha to Saturn Diva and Whitey, and Alpha was talking to Nylok about Flamey. I think I said that right? Yes. But I even had I tried to set it up in a way that it was like we were seeing in the middle of a longer conversation with Flamey first between her and her two friends, that we were just seeing the part where she happened to be talking about Alpha to them. Like before that and after that, they were talking about other stuff or whatever, right? But unfortunately, what happened was because I opened the episode with that and I had that conversation go on for quite a while, it came off as making Flame Girl seem like another leading token girl character who is only defined by her relationship to the main guy. And that was absolutely not my intention, but unfortunately, that's how it came off to a lot of people. So I had a lot of doubts in whether or not, like, oh no, like, have I already like set myself up for failure with this? But, and then especially because I think I've said before about how the episode 7 original script was fucking atrocious. And that is probably more so than any other episode in the show. I owe like practically all of the credit to Liz for making the story of that one, what it was. And now it's a great episode because of that. And it's because of the development that we gave to Flamey and expanding upon stuff that I was already intending, because I did intend for her to have this whole thing with like, her ties with Neo Mutant in person, and like, her being offered to work at the Debuggers organization and everything. And, her background like as a programmer and all that stuff. And especially what we helped weigh in with it is we helped tie it in with kind of her position as the sort of unofficial leader, trying to, solve the mystery, and talking about the last topic of wanting to solve the mystery of what was going on with this game and how it was affecting everything, and also how it was affecting her friends, including Alpha, who she especially cared about more than anybody because of their whole sort of semi-romantic connection that was building up throughout the entirety of the show. And actually, I don't think I've ever talked about this before, but I think this might be the first time ever. But there was actually a point where if the reaction to episode 7 was people generally did not like Flame Girl as a character, then I was actually planning on having, when we did season 2, instead of the new stuff that I came up with that involved like Oddball and that whole little like fake ed intro with Bailey Smith and all that stuff, instead I was going to have something where Flamey would have disappeared for mysterious circumstances. We would have gone a different direction with her in regards to her relations to the hackers and everything. And basically her spot would have been filled by a completely new female character that I had been, coming up with some ideas for. I did not want to go that route. But I had it as a backup plan just in case, like, okay, if people really cannot stand Stephanie as a character in the long run, then I want to go in a bit of a different direction. But I'm really, really glad that I didn't. I'm glad that it's because the reaction that everybody had was positive. People liked where the arc was going. They seemed to like Flamey as a character. Flamey actually has the most amount of fan art of, I think, any individual Tome character, which is kind of incredible, and I'm very humbling. But yeah, I think that a lot of that is majorly in thanks to the stuff that Liz contributed and helping to expand upon her character and make her just a better like story experience like overall for everybody. So I can't thank her enough for that. I don't know if she'll ever hear this Kirblog, but just in general, I wanted to give those ups out. But yeah, so that's an example where the reaction to the show from the audience directly had to do with, okay, I have to think harder about my decisions. I have to think harder about exactly what I'm doing with these characters. And this particular character, specifically, like, what am I going to do with them that will work better? Now, on kind of a different kind of part of this question is negative reaction in terms of like controversial stuff. I will say, and I talked a little bit about this before. I think I had a whole like paragraph about this in one of the Fact Bubble specials about a certain joke that I had in episode 5 about Suzaku and Shogun, where Alpha's like, so which one of you tops? That was something that in retrospect I was like, ooh, that might have been a little like not okay. That might have come off as like maybe even a little like mean or like even hateful to the LBGT community. Because I wasn't trying to imply anything negative about like, haha, they might be gay or whatever. It's like not at all. But that was the thing, is I felt the need to, okay, you know what? I should probably have just a little something in this here, just to explain like what the mentality behind the joke was. And, now granted, that doesn't excuse it. Having an ancillary piece of behind the scenes information on this one obscure video for a particular episode of Tome, that doesn't excuse the fact that like if that did upset somebody, then that's entirely my fault. That was my joke that I made off the cuff that I just thought was like, oh, haha, this is funny, and it's not taking itself too seriously. And even if like I'm not gonna like I'm not playing this card like super seriously, but it's like, no, but my gay friends said it was okay. They thought it was funny, so it's okay. Then it's fine, and nobody should be offended at it. Like, no, that doesn't excuse it either. Like if anybody of the homosexual orientation was offended by that joke, you have every right to be, and I absolutely apologize for doing that. That is not the only example of that sort of thing, being in something that I've produced. I honestly am embarrassed by some of the jokes that I had in a lot of my earlier stuff from Newgrounds. Even on the note of like the jokes at the expense of gay people. I mean, like there's probably tons of shit like that, littered around Parody Rangers and and the Nintendo collabs, and I mean Brawl taunts, like God Almighty. I mean, like Kira and I, like we look back at a lot of those jokes and we're just like, oh God, why, you know, and I won't say specific ones just because I don't even want to think about it, but that's what I mean is like I look back on that now, and it's like if anybody wanted to go find that and point to that and be like, hey, that wasn't okay, I fully take responsibility. Like, 'cause, again, to address this part of the question, it's like, yeah, that's I did that. I did this stupid thing in this piece of media that I released to the world, and that was dumb, and I'm sorry, and what, you know, whether I meant it or not, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, it's still, if it offended, then I apologize. On the case of like, you know, freedom to create whatever, you know, people should be allowed to present and create whatever it is that they want, you know, regardless of who it may affect or whatever. I do think that there is a responsibility that has to be kept. While I believe in freedom of creation, because that was something that I fought for on Newgrounds, was when there was this movement of like people, you know, hating on those who did parodies, you know, which granted, while I do push for people to try and do their own original stuff first and foremost over, you know, doing a parody, what I still will say is I think people are free to do whatever it is that they want. If they want to start out doing parodies, if they want to just do something on the side because they think it's fun or whatever, I completely understand that. And I'm not going to rip on you for doing that. And that's part of the reason why I think I said this on a really old Kirblog by this point about just my feelings on Newgrounds in general. Newgrounds was a place of freedom for all things creatively: animation, games, music, art, whatever. You know, it was supposed to be no judgment. Unfortunately, there was judgment because of just kind of how the community was built or whatever. But it was meant to be, it was meant to be like you could just make whatever you want and put it out there and not have to put any pressure on yourself or whatever. And that's true. But I think that there is definitely like you have to be self-aware of like, okay, how is this going to go? How is this going to, you know, because if the point is, like I said earlier, on like, okay, people are going to be watching and experiencing this thing that I've made, then you have to still think about that. So if you're just going to put like, you know, a bunch of foul language or like, you know, hate speeches or, you know, or gross, like, you know, gore or like, you know, whatever, like nudity and sex or something in it, you know, and it's just like without some kind of actual purpose, then, you know, even if it's just to make people laugh, like what you think will make people laugh, then, you know, then you're not even really thinking about it. You're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Or, you know, might be just for shock value or just to amuse yourself. And it's like, I don't know if there's much value in that necessarily. That's, I guess maybe that could be a whole other topic in and of itself. But the other thing is, especially when you're a public figure and you have a lot of eyes on you and you know, it's kind of just like a double-edged sword. It's like, when you become like well known to any extent, whether like you get 1 million followers or, you know, 100,000 followers or 10 followers, whatever, if anybody knows who you are and you have people that are, especially like whether they're looking up to you or even if they're just watching and following what it is that you're doing and they don't know all the full behind the scenes stuff because they're not required to, you know, it just becomes complicated because like, you know, on one hand you are a consumable piece of media that is open to be judged and crucified for any mistake that you make, whether as a person or through your work, kind of thing, right? You know, I was talking before about how you know how you or how I in this case, you know, I didn't know what the response was going to be, and I went through with the decisions that I made and all the things that I created, and they impacted the way and the people in the way that they did. Which, you know, on the positive note, back on the other hand, is that that's the opportunity that I have in a very great way, is that I can leave a great impact on people with the power of my creativity, and that's what the intention, as the crux of this is supposed to be. The intention is to leave a positive impact through a very powerful and meaningful story experience that I put a lot of time and emotion and effort into, you know, making as good as I perceive it to be. But then back on the negative hand against the positive hand, you know, if you screw up, I believe that you are, you know, to a certain extent, I think, you know, it's fair for people to get down on you. You know, because I think part of it is that it has to do with like taking the proper feedback and criticism so that you can, you know, do better next time, whether that has to do with the person that you are or the stuff that you produce or whatever kind of thing, it's all coming from some place of like logic. I mean, if people are gonna treat you like shit for no good reason, then like, yeah, that's fucked up. But if people are like, hey man, that wasn't cool what you did, or hey, that was unnecessary, or like, oh, why couldn't this have been, how it played out or whatever kind of thing. It's a case by case basis and that sort of way. But I'm saying is like, it's fair for people to feel that way and to react in whatever way that they want to react. You can't control that. I talked a lot about this too, I think in probably many topics, and particularly the surviving high school one I had a little while ago about how you can't change how other people feel or think, and especially not about you. You can only change your actions, and your reactions to how they go. So, I mean, and that was the price I paid. I talked about this in the criticism one about, when Chris O'Neill and Zach Haddle had, bad reactions to the first couple episodes of Tome, and I responded to them, being like, oh, well, then I guess this just isn't for you. It's like, that doesn't fucking solve anything. That just makes me look like an asshole. When I was perceiving, oh, you guys are acting like assholes to me, it's like, no, I made myself look like an asshole and nothing was accomplished out of that. To which then, again, I tried to rectify by going to them for advice from episode 3 onward, and then that was part of why I had the little cameo with them in episode 7 as kind of thanks to, hey, we buried the hatchet, like we have a better understanding of each other and how this whole thing goes now, sort of thing, and it was nice. So yeah, but yeah, so I mean, it was Tome was a really big, in a lot of different ways. It was a big learning experience, probably the biggest I've ever had for my own creative work. In terms of like, getting direct feedback and like getting the opinions and the criticisms of others, and managing the responsibility of, it's the biggest thing that I had. Because in the case of like, I was talking earlier about like my Newground stuff. In the case of the Nintendo collabs, like for instance, like that was a collective effort by a lot of different people. And even Parody Rangers, which was all me. I mean, that was just like, it was just the entertainment. It was either like it made you laugh or it didn't. And, if it either offended you or it didn't kind of thing. It was very cut and dry, but Tome was something a little bit more deeper, where it was, it was meant to be a big positive like story experience, the type of thing that I had always wanted to do with my personal work, and so through the 4 years that we worked on it, I learned a lot more about how this sort of thing goes with creator and viewership interaction as well. I won't prattle on and on because I know I've said this also 1,000 times, but part of that is why I'm so thankful to the people who helped me make the show happen, and that includes its audience. Both the crew and the audience are part of why I was able to come such a long way from episode 1 to episode 15, and everything else in between that as well. It was really an incredible experience, and it's also what's led me now to, again, why, and I apologize for why there's been no like new animated content for a while. It's because all the stuff that I've learned from Tome and more is why I'm really focusing on honing my craft and becoming better at what it is that I want to do in the future, and even also as like my tastes evolve, to bring you a better and a bigger and better story experience on whatever it is that comes next, whether it's Tome related or balancing act or whatever. Who knows what it is that's going to come next? I don't even know 100% for sure, but I want it to be better. I want to progress, and part of that is because of my intention. Again, to stay on topic, my intention is to tell deeper stories, to tell more impactful stories, and things that will reach wider amounts of people and not in terms of like, oh, like bigger and like amass a bigger fan base and a bigger viewership or whatever. Not even in that way, but I mean like things that are more like understandably relatable between everyone, and things that are necessary, that should be tackled, that maybe haven't been tackled as much as they should in other pieces of media, etc. That's the type of stuff that I'm trying to think about really hard, so that when the time comes for me to do whatever it is that comes next, it'll be better, and it'll be as a result of what it is that I've learned from all of my colleagues, all of my own experiences, and from all of you who have been there to stick with me throughout this journey of like wanting to produce content, and whether you're a long time viewer of my stuff or whether like you're someone completely new, it all means the same. It's all incredibly useful. It's all incredibly helpful. And I just hope that I'm on an upward path. I hope that I am doing, better and better with each successive thing. The last little bit too, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but the other thing is this is part of why this is something that I've learned, that kind of both sides of this, like including the dark side of how this kind of goes. When there's been a lot of cases, I won't name names, but where public figures and creators, especially like creators and even like actors in some cases, and just different people in the entertainment business, when they it's hard to find exactly what the line is between people having privacy and having their personal business, and allowing people to make mistakes, but rather if people do something really bad, then they should be allowed to pay for it. I went through an experience over the last several months where I was not feeling great, and it was as a result of feeling that I had done something really, really shitty. And I was really, really hard on myself and really down on myself. And all I wanted to do was work harder to make amends for that, and to just be a better person as a result of what had happened, and not give up, and to do better. And, I'm also a firm believer of if you have a moral issue, if you have a true disagreement with another person in terms of who they are, or what they do, or how they present themselves, or what they say, or the type of impact that they do leave on other people that look up to them and follow them, or whatever it is. And I'm not just talking animation creators or anything, just anybody in general. If you have an issue, then you have the right to completely turn the other cheek and not give them the time of day, and not support them, and just leave them to their little corner of the world. You also have the right to speak out against them and call them out for their bullshit. What the line is for that has definitely, it's become harder to determine in the last several years, because of how Tumblr culture is, and just not even Tumblr specifically, I shouldn't say that. I mean the internet in general, and just how kind of social interaction has changed, and immediately finding out information about people, and then whether that's an invasion of privacy, or whether it's something that needs to be shared with everybody, et cetera, kind of thing. It's a whole, it's very gray. It's very difficult to find an answer for that, and unfortunately I don't. But I don't have the answer to that, and I shouldn't, because I'm not an authority figure on that. But I have my own morals on okay, if there's somebody who I have a personal issue with, or even if I don't know who they are and I don't personally know them, but I know that they've done something to hurt other people, or I don't like the message that they're conveying, I don't like what it is that they have to say, my solution typically is I'm just okay, well then I'm not going to support them. I'm not often the type of person who likes to speak out against another person. This is getting kind of off topic, but it's still relevant to what, the whole intention reaction kind of thing, and more or less. It has to do with kind of what my moral sensibilities are on this whole subject. There's very rare times I can think of where I've gone out of my way to to speak out against someone who I believe has done something wrong. I typically, my choice is typically, it's okay, well then fuck this person for what they've done. I'm not even going to give them the time of day, and I'm not going to support them, and I'm not going to support their endeavors, and and they don't get my attention, they don't get my monetary support, they don't get my anything, kind of thing. That's typically how I go about that. But I also believe that people do have the right to speak out against people that they believe are doing something wrong and should be stopped, or people should be warned about them, or and I'll say right here and right now, that goes for me. I'm gonna put this out here for everybody. My intention is, as I've said time and time again in the last 40 minutes now that we're running on, my intention is to be as positive of an influence on people as possible. But if you go looking, you can find bad things that I have done. You can find bad things that I have said. And I'm not even talking about my cartoons. If you really go hunting, you can find that stuff. And you are, and I don't mean this sarcastically at all, I promise. You are absolutely free to make your own judgments, and they can be negative. You are completely entitled to feel that. And if that's the case, if you don't want anything to do with me, if you don't want to support what I do, if you don't believe me to be a good person in the entertainment world, of online shit or whatever it is you want to determine this as, you have every right to not want to be part of that. And that's not even like, oh, you have my, I don't mean that like you have my permission to not, or whatever. No, I mean like, I'm saying like, please, like, if you feel that way, if anything, I wouldn't want you to waste your time on me. Just like I wouldn't want to waste my time on somebody that I have that type of issue with. And again, it's even possible, like anybody who feels that way that hears this, like if they would even listen to me rant on for 40 fucking minutes about this kind of thing, they could read that as disingenuous. They could read that as, oh, I'm just fishing for people. Like, no, Chris, you're a good person. We believe in you. Why would you ever think that? Why would anybody ever think that? No, there are people who think that, and they're perfectly in the right to think that. My goal is to be a good person, make good entertainment that leaves good, positive impacts on the people who care enough that I appreciate to watch and enjoy and experience what it is that I have created and shared with the world as a whole. Not to sound too like fucking airy fairy, like hippy dippy about it or whatever, but that is my like mantra, I guess. If I don't even know if that's the right word, but that's what I'm all about. I guess I'll say. And I've proven otherwise, and I've done stupid things. I've hurt people. I've made enemies with people. And it's out there, and the evidence of that is all out there, and you can find it if you go looking hard enough, and if you ask around, and if you see the right things about it, like you'll know. You can find out the answers to that stuff. And if you want to go looking for it, you can. That's the blessing / curse of the internet. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I should do about it. I'm not out to go and hide my tragic checkered past of like I did brawl taunts once or whatever. It's like, or worse things than that. But you know what I mean. Like that's not what my intention is either. So yeah, that's a little off topic, and I was debating including that in any video at any point in time. I felt that it was like relatively relevant to to what this was asking of. So I just said relatively relevant. So clearly I'm getting tired and need to wrap this up. I hope that this does answer the question in as many ways as possible and has covered as many different bases as I could. I just kind of hit the record button and just let this go. I didn't know how long this one was going to run for. But to Rtkts, I hope that this answered your question. I'm sorry, I also don't know how to pronounce your screen name right. Thanks for being so patient as well. I think that is gonna wrap us up. So, in the comments below, tell me all your thoughts about all of this. Every and any part of this entire thing that I've covered, because there's a whole lot. But I want to know. I want to know your thoughts on both how it's been, even what it has to do with me and my work. If you want to express anything with work in general as well, and and kind of the main part of the topic with like the intention of something and like your thoughts on it or whatever. If you want to talk about maybe some issues that or things that you disagree with on TOME or anything like that, or anything that I've done before, I'm really curious. Leave your thoughts. Again, I do always read these comments. I do keep up with everything, and I do care about what you all have to say. So let me know. And I don't know what the next one's going to be, so keep the topics rolling. I've got still plenty more where that came from, and I've been really enjoying doing all these. But I'm still open to many, many more. So if you have future Kirblog idea topics, leave a comment about that, and hopefully I will get to them as soon as I possibly can. But in the meantime, thank you all very much for listening, and I will catch you all later. Bye-bye.